Workshops are a crucial element for every single fixer in the city. After all, you can't really expect to survive fight after fight with subpar weaponry, and they are definitely an under-discussed part of the lore of Project Moon so far. So, in order to combat that, in this video I'm going to be talking about everything Workshop, their rules, how they function in general, and then going through every single major and minor workshop we know of so far, and just what it is they do that makes them so different compared to one another. If you like this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe. I enjoy making these kinds of video essays over random parts of Project Moon lore, but I don't know just how much other people do, so this is a good way to gauge people's interest in the format. But enough of that, let's get into the actual video itself. Workshops are a common service seen throughout the city. Similar to offices, each one serves a similar purpose, but each workshop tries to find ways to differentiate themselves from one another in order to make more money and stay afloat. Although workshops are very different fundamentally from offices, while offices focus on taking requests from clients akin to mercenaries, workshops are much more closer to blacksmiths. The primary product of a workshop is weapons. This can be all kinds of things, such as a simple sword with no discernible special qualities, or something more complex like, theoretically, an assassination device that puts someone through 1,000 years of sensory deprivation in mere seconds. Wacky, huh? The leader of a workshop is known as the Meister of that workshop. Workshops can't just sell anything. They need to get any inventions they have made to be certified before they can be put up on the market by none other than the Trace Association. Trace Association is the third association, being named after three in Spanish. They are known as the Workshop Association, and certifying weaponry from workshops is their primary focus. Now, unfortunately, we have yet to actually see Trace Association in action, and we've only heard about them from a couple sources, such as the workshop-affiliated fixers in Ruina and the Rose Banner workshop office in Limbus. The book of the workshop-affiliated fixer is a huge asset in knowing what they do exactly, however, because that's where it's stated that the Trace Association reviews newly designed weapons, files applications to the head, and charges taxes for them. This shows how they basically act as the middleman between the workshops of the city and the head itself, dealing with the applications and the taxes, then and there. The crucial role the head plays for workshops is managing patents. While the head primarily focuses itself on the patents of the singularities of wings, they also manage the patents of every single workshop's weaponry. This has gone into more detail in Mika's book, of all places, where it is stated that if anyone infringes this regulation and still uses technology they shouldn't have access to, they will receive a cease and desist letter up to 3 times. If you can't pay the penalty by the 3rd warning, the claw will tear you down. Patents are a pretty big deal in the city, which is why someone like Nemo, who cares so much about money, was basically frothing at the mouth or the screen outlet? Who knows, at the idea of a patent war. Workshop patents aren't quite as important as corporation patents, but are still treated fairly seriously by the likes of the head. That's probably enough of the general stuff though, so it's about time we go into the workshops itself. Starting with one that's going to be pretty important soon, but remains not too well talked about in the community, Union Co. Union Co is a workshop that is mentioned by name once in Library of Ruina, specifically in Tane's book. They're the workshop that made the bionic arm used by Tane, and, understandably, focused primarily on bionic weapons like that one. If you don't know what exactly it means by bionic weapon, it's a weapon that is physically attached to your body, like a third arm. Shockingly for the Project Moon world, this isn't even done in a body horror kind of way, as Tane states that it's very easy to just attach and detach the weapon to himself when he wants. There's even more info on Union Co. in the art book for Ruina. Kim Ji-hoon, the director of Project Moon, states that there was a lot of ideas for various workshops that would be, assumably, turned into receptions eventually, but were never realized in the game due to wanting to keep the game's length from going too far. It's already enough as it is, so I think that's understandable. And that's why bionic weaponry never made another appearance in Ruina. Another thing from the art book is that it actually shows the artwork for the icon of Union Co., which is visible on the blade of Tane's weapon itself. Another thing in the art book that we can see is what seems to be a possible early idea for another set of bionic Union Co. weapons. These ones look a lot more organic than the ones used by Tane, with one of them even being covered by eyes. It's a set of 4 arms, 3 of which being pincers, while one of them seems to be purely for stabbing. And the little note right there says that these ones fuel themselves with their attacks, draining nutrients from their targets. Whether or not this is Union Co. is uncertain, as it doesn't state for certain, and we still know very little, but they do seem very stylistically and functionally different, possibly from being not as an expensive workshop that also focuses on Bionic, or maybe just a cheaper product from Union Co. The 70% off marking on the weapons on the side definitely makes it seem like there's something off about them. Now, why is this workshop important right now? There's actually a couple of reasons. First off, we're going to be getting a hook office, aka the office that Tane is a part of, Identity in Walpurgis Night. One way or another, Union Co. is about to make its appearance in Limbus Company very soon, with one of their bionic weapons. But that's not all there is to say about Union Co. There's a very high chance of the timing of Union Co. appearing in Limbus through Tane being so close to Canto 5 is no coincidence. The whole idea of weaponry being attached to people sounds very similar to what we know about U-Corp, and how part of their singularity allows them to attach things together. There is a precedence for workshops using the singularities of currently active wings as part of their weapons, such as Namir Workshop in the current G-Corp, or an unnamed workshop in T-Corp. There's a good chance that Union Co. will be based somewhere in Nest U, and very well could show up in some way or form in Canto 5. But I think that's enough for Union Co. for now. There's still a lot of workshops for us to get through, so let's move on to the thing that really brought workshops to the forefront for the first time, and definitely the main reason why I'm so interested in them in the first place. That's right, the weapon revealed by none other than the Black Silence. The Black Silence uses a deck of 9 combat pages. 8 of these are named and based off of various workshops. This is all thanks to the gloves of the Black Silence, which possess dimensional storage powers and allow the user to summon any of the workshop weapons held within at a whim. The only page that isn't from a specific workshop is Durandal, because that's Roland's sword, and didn't originally belong to the actual Black Silence, that being Angelica. For some of these weapons we know nothing beyond just the name and maybe a possibility of what it does, but for some of them we know a little more. All of the weapons are likely to have been custom ordered by Angelica, as they all have the same color scheme and design style, which is likely by Angela's request. This means that none of these are likely to have the actual style of their respective workshops, although it's hard to say for sure. They'll probably still carry traits from those workshops. But the actual design itself is going to be Black Silence-ified. So let's just get started with these. Zelkova Workshop consists of 2 different weapons, an axe and a mace. Zelkova is a type of tree, although the reason for this name isn't made the most apparent from what we've seen. If we look at the axe, it does have a wooden branch for a handle, so the workshop may have a wooden tree aesthetic to do with its non-Black Silence weaponry. Another thing to note of this axe is this pattern of 3 dots present on the blade for both the combat sprite and the page art. It isn't visible on the Urban Plague story art or on the mace at all, so it's hard to say, but this may be the symbol of Zelkova Workshop, as it isn't a shocking idea that most workshops engrave their symbols on their products, like Union Co. did on Tane's scythe arm. Another possible stretch, but this symbol could be supposed to represent the buds of a Zelkova tree, as they are rather circular in a triangular formation around the branch. Moving on to another set of weaponry, Rango Workshop is a knife and 2 gauntlets with claw-like fingers. It's hard to get much more detail out of it, but it is the first appearance of workshops making gauntlets, which is going to be a very commonly seen later on in the video. It's very hard to find what the usage of Rango for the name implies, as nothing I could find had any relevance to the weapon itself. This is just a weapon that we can't really glean much of with the little information we have, but there's a decent chance they're focused on short-ranged, very short-range weapons, stuff like the knife and claw gauntlets, instead of more traditional stuff like, well, swords and axes. Old Boys is a one-handed hammer from the Old Boys Workshop. It contrasts heavily with some of the other weapons of the Black Silence, as while most of them feature very straight, clean lines of action behind the weapon's attacks, Old Boys looks a lot more electrical on the page art, consisting of zigzagged, unclean lines behind it. This makes it look like it seems more of a pure power kind of attack over it being a more controlled attack like the rest of the Black Silence deck. This is ironic since it's one of the weakest attacks in the deck of the Black Silence. The name Old Boys implies that the workshop is old-fashioned, probably focusing on pure power over fancy gimmicks, which definitely seems to be the case with this weapon. Mook Workshop is a longsword or a katana. Mook Workshop, like Union Co., actually has an icon for their workshop in the art book. It's a splash of ink with the Korean character Mook inscribed into it. The English caption for the symbol refers to it as India ink, which is a type of ink that is used for a variety of purposes, and in this situation it's likely based on calligraphy. There's often comparisons between stuff like calligraphy and wielding a sword. It's all about making clean, quick sweeps. I don't know why I'm waving my arm around for this, it's not like you can actually see. And maybe it helps. Mook Workshop most likely focuses entirely on swords like this one, or possibly other precise weapons with a similar feel to them. Katanas are kind of perfect for this whole calligraphy comparison after all. Mook Workshop is also the only Black Science weapon we have any backstory for. In the science story A Fritter Called Gion, Roland takes Angelica out for Pagion in order to find a solid opportunity to apologize for breaking Mook Workshop only a few days after she bought it. This not only serves as a showcase that Angelica was still in the process of assembling her set of weapons during her time at Charles' office, but it also served to result in Angelica confessing to Roland and Roland to admitting his feelings back, and then the start of their relationship proper. How romantic, all thanks to a funny little katana. Wheels Industry is a giant greatsword. It's definitely my favorite of the weapons design-wise, as it's covered in silver-colored gears, which are likely the wheels referenced in the name of the workshop. There's not much else to this one, it's just a very strong sword that seems to rely heavily on gravity to make use of its large size in its attacks, as it seems too large to be used as a conventional sword, even for a fixer with above-average power. Crystal Atelier has two short swords. These are used in conjunction with each other, not being a 1-2, like the other multi-weapon combat pages, instead being crossed over each other as the user dashes into the target. It's likely called Crystal due to the relatively gleaming appearance of the weapons, as Crystal Atelier is a lighter shade of gray than the rest of the Black Science weapons. If we saw an actual Crystal Atelier weapon, there's a decent chance it would be gleaming. Atelier is a French word that is roughly equivalent to workshop, and it's used by quite a few workshops we know of. Whenever you see it in the future, just see that it's basically just a fancier word for workshop. Atelier logic consists of two pistols followed by a shotgun. This is one of the only workshops we know of that's capable of producing firearms, as the head is very strict on construction of firearms, and it's a very pricey process to make them due to this. Atelier Logic is also the manufacturer of the weapons used by Full Stop Office, so they almost certainly make firearms and ammunition exclusively. Full Stop Office's guns look very standard guns, very accurate to real-life guns, as far as I know. I'm not an expert. While the Black Silence's guns are similar but have been decorated to fit with the rest of the Black Silence's deck. Alice Workshop is a lance, and it's the weapon that Angelica is shown to be using against Elena in the Bina realization flashback. It's also the weapon that Roland uses to finish off Argalia for the final time, piercing him directly through his heart. So it's safe to say that it's got a lot of importance to it, despite its very simple nature. Not much is there to say about this weapon. Alice itself is a word that means an open container of water, so I have no idea what the name of this weapon means. However, for a very clean transition, there is another Alice Workshop weapon we know of, so it's time to say goodbye to the deck of the Black Silence and say hello to our resident workshop enthusiast from none other than Moses' office. That's right, Ezra. Ezra is one of the main characters of Distortion Detective, and she serves as Moses' assistant, usually being the one who takes the offensive in fights. One of her main interests is workshops, and she loves to collect various weaponry from them. While she lacks something as convenient as dimensional storage gloves, she instead has her dimensional storage bag, in which she stores all of her workshop gear, and some other random things here and there. The most frequently used tool of Ezra is her Alice Workshop gloves. These gloves aren't a weapon itself, but instead are meant to be used alongside her other workshop weapons. Alice Workshop gloves increase the speed of the wearer's hands by 5 times, which makes them an incredible asset to wield heavier weaponry, or even to just wield normal weaponry with even greater speed. Huri Workshop gloves are only used a single time in Distortion Detective, as Moses borrows them from Ezra in order to freeze a wall. Kukri Workshop likely is primarily focused on ice-based weaponry, as there are a couple of elemental-themed workshops we know of, as you will see later on in this video, so this isn't that much of a stretch. We never get to see them in action, only for freezing a single wall, so we can't get a good sense of just what they're capable of, but Frost can be a pretty powerful status to make use of, so who knows? The name itself is likely based on cool in some way or form, but I've got no source on that, so take it as you will. Nestor Workshop produces the Nestor Hammer, which Ezra has used on a few occasions. It is stated to be a small hammer that has the ability to hit very hard, which is potentially the gimmick of the entire workshop, seemingly weaker weapons that are more than capable of packing a punch. Nestor itself may be a play on words regarding the nests of the city, as a Nestor is pretty clear to see, a word for a bird in a nest, so Nestor may be trying to appeal to the feathers who live in the nests. A small weapon with a lot of force can be concealed much easier than a normal weapon, and likely could be seen as the city's equivalent of pepper spray, perhaps? That could definitely appeal to people who live in nests. Namir Workshop's gauntlets were mentioned very briefly in the Union Co. section of the video. Namir Workshop is partnered with the current G-Corp, and makes use of their singularity with their weaponry. Current G-Corp, not to be confused with the fallen G-Corp from the Smoke War, has some sort of gravity-altering singularity, and its inclusion in the Namir gauntlets gives the wielder the ability to manipulate the gravity of the gauntlets, which can be used to get gravity to enhance attacks in directions other than just straight down. This results in some very powerful pummeling, although, in the course of Deterrent Detective so far, it's only resulted in the decimation of a giant teddy bear and a failed attempt to take down a wall. Maybe there'll be better tidings for this potential-filled workshop later down the line. Namir itself is Hebrew for leopard, which could just be a cool name, or maybe it's making the connection between this reduction of gravity, increasing one's agility, and the agility of a leopard? Or maybe it has to do with the actual weapons itself, which we haven't seen, since gauntlets are a pretty simple weapon. Maybe if we see the actual weapons themselves, they'll be leopard-themed. Maybe they're leopard-spotted. Who knows, since Distortion Detective is very text-based and there's not a lot of visual stuff for it as of yet. The Distortion Detective game will come sooner or later, I'm sure. Wind Valley Workshop is another one of those elemental-themed workshops, with their Wind Valley Gauntlet having the ability to launch a powerful gust of wind in the direction a punch is thrown. Very simple weapon, once again with a lot of potential later on. It's almost certain that Wind Valley Workshop focuses on wind-themed weaponry. I really don't think I need to explain the name for this one. I really hope you can get a decent sense of where the name Wind Valley Workshop comes from, for these wind-themed punches. I don't know. I believe in you guys. You'll get it. Banar Workshop doesn't have a weapon for us to look at, but instead has made pressure bandages for the use of covering up wounds. They came out of a medkit from Ezra's bag, but it's unclear whether or not the entire medkit was made by Banar Workshop or if it was just the bandages themselves. But only the bandages are referred as Banar Workshop by name. So it's probably just the bandages, but the entire thing would also make sense. The specifics of how the bandage work are also not gone into detail, so whether or not a singularity is involved or if it's just fancy tech is up to interpretation. Fanar is Hebrew for lantern, another Hebrew-based workshop name, which could be some sort of metaphor for their healing being powerful enough to guide you through the dark? Or maybe Fanar Workshop makes more than just medical supplies and the name will be referring to something like that, like a big, lobotomy corp lamp type weapon. Who knows? Last but not least of Ezra's weaponry, we have another very commonly used weapon by her, the Stigma Workshop Sword. Stigma Workshop is all about burn, and the Stigma Workshop Sword is heated with a wire, and when it slices through things, it leaves behind an intricate pattern which is stated to be a staple of Stigma Workshop. Stigma itself means a mark or marks left behind with negative connotations behind it, something like a mark of shame. So the intricate patterns left behind by Stigma Workshop weaponry is supposed to be their stigma. Stigma Workshop is also where the weapons used by Dawn Office originate. It's the name of their passive which makes them inflict more burn. Salvador's book also lends to the naming of Stigma, as it talks about how the orange marks left by yesterday's promise are similar to those left behind by Stigma's Workshop's weaponry. The art book also mentioned the ignition devices used in the Weaponry of Liu Association is similar to that of Stigma Workshop. Whether this means they got the rights to the same type of technology used by Stigma, or if it's just similar by coincidence, we don't know. That's most of the weapons used by Ezra covered, but there's a pretty big category of workshop weapons that have not been referenced at all yet. Ezra does have a personal supplier of workshop gear after all, that being another main character of Distortion Detective, Yuria, and her workshop, Yuria Atelier. Yuria Atelier is run by Yuria, and is very unique as far as workshops go. Yuria is the only employee, and the location itself doesn't exist. Yuria's ego, or psychomint as she calls it, is the workshop itself. She's capable of opening a door into Yuria Atelier from any existing door, and the workshop itself is manned by a workforce of giant teddy bears, which is another part of her ego. Yuria Atelier only sells weaponry to people who they send invitations to, and has a primary focus on targeting other people with ego so that Yuria can study it and learn more about it. That's why she originally wanted to buy Moses' pipe from her, as that is Moses' ego, and Yuria wanted to get a hold of it. Moses and Yuria eventually get to an agreement where Yuria can study the pipe and tag along with them, in exchange for Yuria making some various inventions for Moses and Ezra, which I will go over some of them here. The most notable invention Yuria makes for Moses is the ribbons. Each of them is a different color, and Moses can tie them to her pipe in order to modify how it works. Yuria told Moses that she should select the color for a situation based on the emotion that Moses is feeling, or the emotion Moses wants for her pipe. There's only 3 different colors of ribbons that we actually saw the effects of, and their effects were the following. Red ribbon. The red ribbon's the first one shown, and when attached to the pipe produces flaming birds when she uses her red breath. The purple ribbon. This ribbon is used twice. Once it's used in order to use the pipe in order to restrain something using a violet breath, with Moses saying a feeling of enveloping something is her target. The second time, it's used for a penetrating feeling, and on use with another violet breath, it converts the pipe into a rifle with a single shot. And then finally, the orange ribbon. Moses asks for a twining ribbon, which isn't exactly an emotion, but Yuria still responds by giving her the orange ribbon. This ribbon is used in order for the pipe's white breath to create a protective smoke that wraps around Vespa and shields him from psychological attacks. While this is a pretty small selection of ribbons, there is potential in analyzing it further. In case you can't tell, the different colored breaths done by Moses correlate to the 4 damage types from Lobotomy Corporation. Red for physical, white for mental, violet, which represents black, for a mixture of the two, or also known as erosion, and pale for damage directly to the soul, or just straight up its death itself. The ribbons, however, may correlate to that of the sins that later showed up as the damage types in Limbus Company. The red ribbon produces fire and very wrathful-seeming attacks, like Wrath. The purple version is used both to restrain and to pierce, which both fit Envy fairly well. And the orange ribbon is used to protect, which isn't the most lustful thing, but it still could be related to lust. Lust for people, relationships, something like that. Healing? Not healing, but you know. If this is the case, this means Yuria has found a way to weaponize the 7 sins around the time the library is an urban legend, which means likely long before Limbus was started proper. This definitely means that Yuria Atelier's products themselves are also ego, as elsewise it probably wouldn't be able to manifest through sins. Moses is also using both Lobotomy Corporation and Limbus Company's damage types at the same time, being able to mix the Horseman damage types and the 7 sin damage types as she so wishes. Also, she's using the strongest stat effect from Ruina, Smoke, meaning that by the game's logic, Moses is an absolute powerhouse. Yuria has also made a few other gadgets here and there, mainly for the sake of Ezra, and are kept in Ezra's bag for the most part. Let's go over them now. Night vision glasses. These are 3 pairs of glasses adorned with ribbons. Not the ribbons that Moses uses for her pipe, however, just purely decoration ribbons, which Yuria has a little bit of a habit of putting over a lot of her inventions. The glasses are able to adjust the wearer's vision to be able to see perfectly clear, regardless of the light levels, and can quickly adjust to changing light levels. They also had a built-in recording device, which was used by Yuria in order to review footage from when they were worn. Exoskeleton. A powerful exoskeleton for Ezra that consists of many different functions. Some of these are the Uria-style power drill, which pulls out 3 drills from the left arm of the exoskeleton, or the Uria-style axe, a powerful 2-headed battle axe which had a lot of strength behind it. Think this as a giant mech suit for Ezra, and you'll get the general gist. Psychomint Pendant. A bunch of pendants crafted by Yuri in order to try and draw out Ezra's own Psychomint/ego. It takes a lot of time for Yuri to carve them out, and they seem to be one-time uses. This is another thing that shows that Yuri's products are almost certainly byproducts of her own ego, as otherwise she definitely wouldn't be able to make something capable of helping to manifest one's ego. And then finally, the Power Gauntlet, which is a gauntlet made for Ezra but was used by Moses. This one's interesting because it requires a very specific set of inputs to use, as you need to clench your fist, unclench, clench your fist, unclench, then you gotta make a fist, and then when the glove turns red, then you punch. There's no reason given to why that's like the actual set of commands needed, but it is. Very interesting. Yuria definitely has some interesting inventions out there. But that is all we have for Yuria Atelier. Due to her unfortunate condition of Yuria's soul being trapped inside of a small stuffed bear as another side part of her ego when her body almost died, there isn't much she can make at this point in Distortion Detective, although she did state that she made 11 things for Ezra, so we don't know what else Yuri has made that just has yet to make its way out of the dimensional bag. That's all for the major categories of workshops dealt with. So now it's time to do a little bit of cleanup and go through all the workshops not mentioned yet. There's also going to be a few workshops that actually go unnamed here, but there are a few notable ones from a few random sources. I won't go over every single unnamed workshop, of course, as some of them have nothing interesting going on, or are just like oh, I got my weapon from a workshop, and that's the entire thing with them. But these all should be relatively interesting, I'd hope. Mika's book provided some info for us earlier on, talking about the patterns of workshops. However, later down in her book, she gives an example of patents through the workshop that had been run through her father. One day, Mika's father made a weapon for someone else. However, unbeknownst to him, the weapon was patented and he didn't have the rights to the patent, despite the person with the patent being the one who requested the weapon. Because of this, Mika's father met an unspecified fate, which, based on what Mika said earlier in her book, was likely at the hands of the Claw. This definitely shows that workshops are very likely to be hit by scams like this, just to get themselves killed, so that whoever got them killed can get some sort of minor benefit. Leaflet Workshop is the star of the city general reception from Library of Ruina. It's ran by Ye, and focuses on smoke-based weaponry and a steampunk aesthetic. Leaflet Workshop came to the library because Ye heard a rumor from a friend who was trained at the same workshop from her that there is some kind of method to tinker with the mind that can be learned about in the library. Based on this, it's very plausible that his friend was Yuria, as this method to tinker with the mind has to do with ego, and there's not very many people in the city who know about that kind of thing. There's definitely some strange flaws with this theory, such as why Yuria would tell someone this kind of thing, but Star of the City takes place far after the events of Distortion Detective, and we don't know just when it went down in detail, so honestly, who knows? In the second part of the reception of Han Association, Olivier makes his return, revealing something he had planted onto Angela in the first part of the reception, the T-Corp assassination device. Now, this device isn't made by T-Corp itself, and instead was made by an unnamed workshop that just partners with T-Corp in order to gain access to its singularity. The T-Corp assassination device puts someone through 1,000 years in the span of a second, which is basically enough to turn anyone's brain to mush. We don't ever get to see it in action, but the idea of applying T-Corp singularity to gadgets and even weapons could be a very lethal combo, and we are starting to see something similar with the T-Corp collectors in Limbus, and we're probably going to get to their nest sooner or later. Even if we probably aren't going to see this specific workshop, we'll definitely see the power of T-Corp's weaponry. A major part later on in Distortion Detective is when Moses' office is tasked by the Thumb to investigate an unnamed workshop that the Thumb's partnered with. This workshop makes firearms for the Thumb, making it the only other gun-certified workshop we know of alongside Atelier Logic. Unlike Atelier Logic, however, this workshop doesn't produce any ammunition. Instead, the ammunition for the guns produced by this workshop are made at the Thumb HQ itself. Now, unfortunately for this workshop, not only is it located in the fallen nest of L-Corp, but it also was wiped out by a distortion known as the Marksman of the Mist, who took over in order to get the thumb-made ammunition for use in his rifle as part of his distortion. Rose Banner Workshop Office is a hybrid workshop office, as they not only carry out the duties of a workshop and make weaponry to be sold, but they also take on contracts using their weaponry like any other office. They're run not by a maestro or an operator, but by a rep, which may or may not be the case for any other workshop office hybrids out there. The rep of Rose Banner is none other than the star gambler Nico. We don't know much about the products of Rose Banner Workshop Office beyond what we've seen from them in Limbus, but most, if not all, of the office has been wiped out by Limbus Company after Rose Banner took a contract working for Technology Liberation Alliance. But in conclusion, that's pretty much every workshop we know decently about. There's a few other random things here and there, but nothing that warrants any proper discussion. While there's so much lore regarding workshops, they still really have yet to hit it big in the games themselves, with the most important one so far being Rose Banner. But with Trace Association being guaranteed to make their debut sooner or later, and Limbus' nature of traveling around the city instead of staying in place, I think there's almost certainly going to be an increased focus on the workshops of the city going forwards. And that, of course, is something I'm certainly excited about. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.